Welcome back to the Application Lifecycle Development course. In this lesson, we're going to set up our continuous deployment for our production environment. Now, you've already done this once with our staging environment. We're going to do it again with production this time. Now, note on our lifecycle project page, the main page, a summary, we actually have number of builds succeeding. It's not 100% anymore, it's 86%. And 2 out of 3, or 67%, our deployments have been successful. Much more helpful if that's actual numbers based upon, working. But for right now, it just tells us that those dials work. Once you get going, hopefully these numbers here with the number of commits goes up. Number of pull requests open probably should go up as well. And hopefully these percentages get much, much better. So let's go over to our pipelines and go to release. And we're going to copy this staging pipeline and put it into release. Now, before we do, don't forget that we need that branch on our server. So let's bring this back over. And right now, again, if I were to clear the screen and say get status, we're on the origin master branch. If I say get branch, it shows we have 2 branches, master, which we're currently on, and staging. So I need to create a branch for our release, which I'm going to call release. So get checkout -b for create new branch, release. And then get push -u origin release. That's going to wire up our local release to the server release. And once that's done, it should be on the new branch. So we can do get checkout master. And now we come back over here to our repo. We'll see we have master and release and staging. They all look the same right now. We'll change that in a little bit, but for now, we're good. So what we can do is we can go over to our pipeline releases and make a copy of staging. So select staging and say clone. And we're going to change this from staging to release. And we're also going to make some changes in here. For example, it's not LP staging, it's going to be lifecycle project. Are reflected when you're running your application. So I can hit save here. We need to change the name. It's not the staging pipeline anymore. It is the production pipeline. Initial creation of the pipeline. And we're done. So that should be all we need to do for this pipeline. So what we can do is we could create a release or make sure it's triggered. Let's go ahead and create a release. We don't want staging. So let's cancel that out real quick. Make sure that we come back in here. Just look real quick. Make sure it didn't revert. It is triggering off of release. Good. Okay. All right. Production pipeline, trigger a release, and a manual release. All right. So I see the issue here. It's saying which stage, and it's staging, which means that no one yelled at me, or maybe you did and I just didn't hear you. It's called staging here. That's not right. This is production. So let's hit save on this. And there we go. That should be good. And now let's check our builds, make sure we have our latest build, which is .6, is on release. So we can go to our production pipeline, create a release. We're going to trigger a, actually let's clear this out and do this over again. We're going to trigger a manual on point 6 and just say go from here. Which what that will do is it will take those build from that release and execute it here. So there we go. We've queued release 1 for production. So release 1 worked on staging. Release 1 failed on development, but number 2 succeeded. And now we'll see how release 1 for production does. All right, so now our build has succeeded. Everything seems to have worked as intended. There's no errors here. So let's do this. Let's go over to our dashboard, to our web app, open it up, and launch it. Again, it'll take a couple seconds the first time to load up since it's just starting and because it's on a cheap server. When you get to a higher level of payment, what you can do is set up it kind of like spins up beforehand. Also a slot swap. What it will do is it will spin both of them up, make sure they're both what's called warm, meaning they're ready for connections, and then it will switch them so that you never have that long lag time even in a deploy. So this is our production server, and if we click register, it'll take a second, but it should go to register for us. We can see the database that will get created. But we're also going to go to, I'm not actually going to register on the production site yet, but I'm going to go to the About page, and there we go. There's our 3 entries for people on the About page. Tim Corey, Sue Storm, and Bob Smith. Just to prove those are the 3 entries, let's do this. Let's go over to our user database. We're going to write an insert script. Insert into dbo.person table, first name, last name, and the values are going to be, let's go for Mary person. She's a married person. And that should be it. It is yelling at me. Let's find out why. Oh, there you go. It's gone away. It does have to, just like the kind of spooling out for the website, it's also spooling up for this new database. If I hit execute, I've added 1 new entry, married person. And if we go to the About page, we'll now see married person shows up in the list. A little small there, but there you go. That's our new entry in the production database. Now, before we're done, I do want to add something into this process. Let's go back over to our pipeline, and if we look at the pipeline itself and hit edit, right now this gets triggered automatically to build into production as soon as you push to release. So you push to release, it gets built, and this pipeline picks it up and goes, okay, and pushes it right to release. That's fine if it's not a real production environment. The problem is with real production environments, there's a lot more work that has to go into making sure that everything's correct. And when do you do it? You have downtime windows and all these different things. Now, the downtime would be very small, but there's still downtime. So we don't want to do this at the middle of the day. We also don't want to allow just anybody to push the release branch. So we're going to click right here on pre-deployment conditions. So here's our options for what we can do or turn on. One of them is gates, another is pre-deployment approval. We're going to do approvals. So I click that, and now it says who can approve. So I'm going to start typing admin, but there's no admins. Let's go look at what the people are for our project, or what the groups are, I'm sorry. So the groups are the lifecycle project team is the only team we have. There's only one person in that, and that's fine. So let's just start typing. I wish we had an ellipsis here to actually look it up. It's one of those quirks. It's a lifecycle project team. So basically anybody on the team can approve this. Now, does that defeat the purpose? Kind of, but not really. So this means that anybody that has permission to this repository also has permission to go ahead and approve this move to production. But what it does is it stops you and says, okay, but before I do this, you've got to say yes, go one last time. The other thing it allows is it allows when we do approve it to say we approve it, but for a different time. And you can schedule that out so that you might approve it at 11:30 in the morning, but say don't deploy until midnight. That's when the least amount of customers are on, and that's when we have our service window. Now, if you have a team with a couple of people on it, you can check this box that says the user requesting a release should not also approve it. So it's going to check to make sure that you're not the one both saying, yes, here's something to release, and yes, go ahead and approve it. All right, and the rest of the stuff, there's gates here you can set up. You can say delay before evaluation. You can add specific gates, and there's different checks you can put in there. For example, you could look at testing results and say, well, if the performance is above X, as in it's too slow, then don't push it to production. We're not going to put any gates in place. We're just going to have the pre-deployment approval, and the timeout is 30 days. So after 30 days, it expires. So what's going to happen is it's going to ask us, do you want to approve this? And we have to say yes before the actual push happens. We could also say no. So we have both options, or we can push another branch and push that one instead. Now, one thing let's go ahead and save this. Add pre-deployment approval. The other thing we could do is we also schedule in here and say that this process only gets kicked off at certain times of day, maybe again at midnight. And then it will look for the release branch and say, is there anything on that? What's the latest one if I push that yet? And so if there's 5 in there, it's going to take the latest one and push that one instead. So there's different options you can do. You can play around with this a lot and tweak it really to be specific to your environment. But this is what we're going to do for our very simple process. Now, I did debate what I could have done is I could have added another stage. So I could say add another stage right after the staging one to say staging and then approve that to go on to production. But I decided to keep them separate. And the reason I did because I like the idea of that full separation where we can take something as staging and then back it back out. We can do all these other things, and yet we can still take things all the way through to production. So there's our pipelines. We have development, staging, and production. We're all set up. We're set up with our build as well. And so at this point, we're ready to start working on how to actually see this workflow. Basically, all these lessons so far have been set up. Getting things ready, getting the environment ready, getting our cloud hosting ready, getting our code ready, getting our repository ready. All this stuff's been set up. Now what we're going to do in the next lesson is test this whole process. And as soon as we're comfortable, we should be comfortable, but as soon as we're comfortable, then we'll move on to the even next lesson where we're going to do a simple flow of how it would work in a small environment. And we'll take it up a notch to maybe a little more of an advanced environment, still probably a small team. And then from there, we'll see other options we can do.